A day meant for vows, music, and celebration. The sanctuary was already set, silk runners down the aisle, mahogany chairs spaced with precision, white roses at the altar, cameras were mounted, the live stream countdown already in motion. The bride's dress, untouched, hung inside a suite at the Intercontinental Hotel. Guests were arriving from as far as Detroit and Charlotte. Pastors from across the Southeast had confirmed. All for one man, Reverend Delano Isaiah Briggs. But by 6:43 a.m., that wedding wouldn't just be postponed. It would be replaced by a crime scene. A call came in from a private estate in North Atlanta. Emergency services were told there had been an accident, a fall, a sudden injury. No weapon mentioned, no screaming heard. When officers arrived, the front door was unlocked. No signs of struggle in the living room. Just coffee brewing in the corner. A phone vibrating endlessly on the granite kitchen counter. A red light blinking on the security panel. And then, a guest bedroom door slightly ajar. Inside, lying face down on the floor, was a man. Fully clothed. Eyes open. Motionless. No blood. No glass shattered. No overturned furniture. Just stillness. His name, Micah Rollins. 27, church administrator, trusted assistant, best man in the wedding scheduled to take place 9 hours later. A few feet away, Reverend Briggs sat on the edge of his bed, shirtless, calm, staring at the wall, not crying, not asking for help, just breathing, slowly, repeatedly. When officers asked what happened, he didn't say Micah's name. He didn't ask if he was alive. He didn't pray. He said 4 words. He said no, then everything went wrong. The footage wouldn't be aired. The wedding would never happen. But what did happen inside that house was darker than betrayal, more calculated than heartbreak, and more terrifying, because no one saw it coming. Before the crime, before the arrest. Before the headlines turned faith into footage, there were just 2 men. One with the spotlight, one behind it, one preparing for vows, the other carrying the weight of silence. Delano Isaiah Briggs, age 42, lead pastor of Grace House of Power Ministries. A church with over 7,000 members and twice as many live stream viewers. His name was carved into the side of the sanctuary. His sermons aired every Sunday across 5 states. His voice, clean, authoritative, soft around the edges, made people cry without understanding why. He wasn't the kind of preacher who paced the stage. He didn't need theatrics. Delano stood still, spoke slow, and people leaned in like their lives depended on it. Degrees in divinity and public policy. He wasn't just a man of God. He was a strategist. He had friends on the school board, sat on panels about black fatherhood, walked red carpets with gospel artists, and in just 24 hours, he was supposed to marry one of them. Cherise Dupree, Grammy-nominated, known for a soprano that could shake rafters. Their wedding had been branded Heaven and Harmony. Guests were told to wear ivory. The city was watching. But no one was watching what was happening inside his private life. Micah J.L. Rollins, age 27, assistant, office administrator, the man who carried Delano's Bible, booked his flights and coordinated his calendar down to the second. Known for his order, loved for his quiet. A graduate of Morehouse, former youth minister, grew up in Macon with his grandmother, who kept 2 framed Bibles by the bed. One for reading, one for remembering. She taught him to iron his slacks before sunrise and to never pray louder than you're willing to live. Micah never sought attention. He arrived before everyone else, left after the last volunteer, never asked for a title. But if you needed to know where Pastor Briggs was at any given hour, Micah knew. Delano called him my armor bearer, said God assigned Micah to his side. And for 3 years, Micah believed that. He attended every staff meeting, typed every sermon, and handled documents that even Delano's fiancée didn't see. They were close, but not friends, partners in faith, but not equals. One had power, the other, proximity. Members started to notice. Whenever Delano traveled, Micah went with him, but stayed off the billing receipts. When Delano hosted men's retreats, Micah handled the itinerary, but didn't speak during devotion. And when the two of them returned from a weekend in Charlotte, one of the musicians said Micah looked different. Eyes low, voice slower, laughter gone. Still, no one asked. Because when someone looks like they have access, it's easy to mistake their silence for satisfaction. But Micah wasn't satisfied, and access wasn't safety. It was surveillance, control, and eventually, a sentence. Micah Rollins wasn't hired. He was chosen. That's how Delano phrased it. Said he didn't trust resumes. Said real discernment comes from the Spirit, not LinkedIn. So when Micah stepped into Grace House of Power, it wasn't as a temp, it was as someone assigned. The pastor told him, "God told me to pour into you. Don't question what's divine." Micah said nothing, but he stayed late, took notes, showed up clean and early every morning. Not because he wanted to impress, but because this was the kind of place his grandmother used to pray he'd be part of. A church that looked like legacy. That first year, everything had structure. Weekly check-ins, staff devotionals, sermon planning meetings that ended in prayer. But something changed around month 14. The meetings became one-on-ones. The phone calls shifted from 9 to 11 to midnight. Micah would get messages that said, "You up?" followed by, "I'm just in my head. Want to run some things by you." He'd show up to the pastor's condo. Lights dimmed, gospel jazz humming low, no laptop out, no sermon notes, just Delano, on the couch, waiting. There was never a line crossed. Not physically, not yet. But Micah felt it. The shifts, the pauses, the watching. Delano's compliments started coming differently. "You carry stillness in a way that's attractive. Most men your age don't walk with that kind of balance. You don't just help me, you calm me." It wasn't flirty. It wasn't sexual. It was something else. Something Micah couldn't name but didn't like. He started making excuses. "I got a headache. Car's in the shop. Sister's in town." And that's when Delano went quiet. For 3 days, no texts, no eye contact during morning prayer. Then, a voice memo. "You letting distance speak louder than loyalty. Be careful." Micah didn't reply. He just showed up, on time, head down, heart unsure. Because when the person you work for also signs your spiritual permission slip, you start thinking maybe the discomfort is your own disobedience. That maybe saying no is rebellion. That maybe backing away is betrayal. And that's how trust works. Not all at once. Not in grand gestures. It breaks slowly, under the weight of what no one else can see. In ministry, silence is supposed to mean reverence. But what Micah started feeling didn't come from God. There was a shift in how Delano looked at him, in how he touched his shoulder, in how the thank yous disappeared, and the requests turned into expectations. It didn't happen loud. It wasn't announced. It just appeared and stayed. He'd walk into the office and feel the air press against his chest. He couldn't name what was off, but his body knew it before his mind admitted it. His hands started shaking during worship. He kept his phone on silent, even during breaks. He started sitting near exits, even in staff meetings. The same man who once told him, "You're my peace," now sent messages like, "Be careful how far you pull back. Loyalty's a two-way street." The others at the church noticed, but not what mattered. They saw his posture change. They said he looked tired, that he needed rest. One elder joked, "Micah, when the wedding's over, you gon' finally breathe?" He forced a smile, but inside he wasn't holding his breath. He was holding his truth. And then came the pressure. Not verbal, not physical, spiritual. Delano started quoting scripture in ways that hit different. "Touch not my anointed. He who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is unfit for the kingdom." Submission isn't weakness, it's access. And people clapped, because they didn't know who the message was for. Micah began to wonder, was he complicit? Was he enabling something? Or was he trapped in a loyalty test he never agreed to take? Every time he considered quitting, he'd hear his grandmother's voice in the back of his mind. "Don't walk out until God says you're released." But what if God's voice was being mimicked by a man who knew how to quote him better than he knew how to obey him? In the days leading up to the wedding, Delano grew more intense. He started calling Micah late into the night, sending voicemails like, "You're gonna leave me in this season, after everything I poured into you? You think God's gonna reward disobedience? Micah, don't make me beg." That last message, Micah didn't answer. He just stared at it, deleted it, then put his phone face down. But what Micah didn't know was this. That silence and that final no wasn't just the end of a mentorship. It was the beginning of a countdown. There's a thin line between obedience and ownership, and when power wears a robe, people confuse control for covering. Delano had built his pulpit like a throne. He didn't demand loyalty. He expected it to be sewn into every handshake, every yes, every lowered head when he entered a room. He spoke of kingdom order, of spiritual hierarchy, of divine submission, and people believed him, because they wanted to, because when a man speaks softly but stands tall, it's easy to mistake his presence for protection. Micah saw through it, not all at once, but piece by piece. When he said no, Delano didn't argue. He just changed the rules, took Micah off the payroll, said it was temporary, budget restructuring. Then he removed his church email, told staff Micah had requested time off. None of it was true. But Micah didn't speak up. He didn't fight it. He just sat with it. The erasure. The rewriting of a story he was still living. On March 9th, Micah told his roommate, "After the wedding, I'm done. I'll write my resignation, send it, and block every number." He didn't say it in anger. He said it like someone tired of waiting for the floor to give out. But Delano wasn't done. The night before the wedding, Delano invited Micah to his estate, said he had one last document to sign for the ceremony. Something small. 10 minutes max. Micah hesitated. He told a friend over text. "He wants me to come by. Says it's quick, but I don't trust that." The friend replied, "Then don't go." But Micah went. Maybe to close the door. Maybe to prove he wasn't scared. Maybe just to finally be done. The cameras outside the estate caught him arriving at 9:47 p.m. alone. No backpack, no coat, just him. Shoulders squared. What happened next? No camera caught, only the aftermath. But neighbors would later say they heard raised voices around 11:15, a man yelling, "You don't get to walk away from me." Then a door slammed. Then silence. What the police found the next morning was what silence looks like when it turns fatal. Micah's body on the floor, fully clothed, no blood, but trauma. Internal injuries consistent with prolonged physical assault, signs of struggle, defensive wounds, DNA from under his fingernails, all belonging to one person. The same person who sat in the other room, waiting, breathing, calm. March 11th, 2023. 6:43 a.m. The first officer steps into the foyer. The air inside isn't tense. It's too still for that. There's no shouting, no panicked bride. Just the faint sound of a gospel instrumental looping from a smart speaker in the corner. and a man in sweatpants sitting on the edge of his bed. Reverend Briggs, shirtless, phone in hand, Bible open on the nightstand, staring at nothing. The guest bedroom door is cracked open. What they find inside stops time. Micah Rollins, unresponsive, no blood, no signs of forced trauma from weapons. But his hands were curled, and under his fingernails, fragments of skin that would match only one person. His body showed signs of restraint, bruising around the neck and wrists, blunt impact to the chest and side, ligature compression, deliberate, sustained. This wasn't a fall. This wasn't an accident. Officers asked Delano what happened. He says, "He came over late. Things got tense." Then he pauses. He said something disrespectful. I told him to leave. Next thing I know, he's on the floor. No CPR performed. No 911 call from Delano's phone. Just stillness. And waiting. Officers escort Delano from the bedroom. Guests from out of town are already arriving at the church. The florist is setting up arrangements. The groomsmen's suits are hanging in a hotel suite across town. Charisse Dupree, the bride, receives a call at 7:23 a.m. She collapses before the second sentence. The wedding is canceled, becomes a text, then a headline, then a live-streamed emergency prayer vigil. What no one knows yet is that behind that cancellation is a homicide, and behind that homicide is a secret too layered for press releases. The congregation responds with disbelief. It must be a mistake. Micah probably overdosed. The devil always attacks greatness on the edge of elevation, but officers already know. The story doesn't add up. The room shows no signs of a break-in. Micah's phone is found in his pocket. Last outgoing text. I'll be back in 10. The autopsy confirms the worst. Micah didn't die quickly. His injuries suggest pressure, prolonged, focused, the kind of harm that comes, not from rage, but from entitlement. Delano is detained, but not yet charged. His attorney releases a statement. This was a tragedy. Reverend Briggs is cooperating fully. But when they open the home's security footage, they discover something else. The camera pointed at the front door was unplugged. Only one person had access to the security system password. Only one person reset it 2 nights before. Delano. And now, the man who stood behind the pulpit for 18 years is now behind a plexiglass window, waiting for bail. The church said it was a spiritual attack. That's always the first response when something this ugly happens this close to the altar. But investigators weren't looking for demons. They were looking for evidence. And what they found was silence. Documented. Micah's phone was the first clue. Over 172 unanswered messages from Delano. Voice memos. Missed calls between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Deleted threads. Recovered. Texts like, I'm not asking again. You know you owe me. Don't make this hard. One of the most telling, I covered you. I raised you up. And this is how you honor me. The tone wasn't of a pastor speaking to staff. It was of a man, losing control over what he thought he owned. Investigators traced messages going back a year. Patterns emerged. Micah had said no before, subtly, politely. And each time Delano responded the same way. Praise. Pressure. Punishment. First with isolation, then with guilt, then with silence. Detectives also interviewed former interns. One said, Micah once told me, if I ever go missing, check Delano's house first. I laughed. He didn't. Another said, I asked him why he never quit. He just said, because I don't have the kind of power to walk away clean. Those statements hit differently when your witness is already dead. Forensics found small but telling things. Delano's fingerprints on Micah's wrists. DNA match from defensive scrapes under Micah's nails. An unlocked file on Delano's laptop labeled Watchman, a private folder containing audio files of one-on-one meetings. They found recordings, conversations with Micah, some spiritual, others personal, and one terrifying. It starts with prayer, then switches tone. You hear Delano say, "Micah, I told you I don't need you to be perfect, just loyal." Then a pause. Then Micah's voice, barely above a whisper. "You're crossing a line. This ain't God." The file cuts off, but the message doesn't. The district attorney called it emotional captivity, the kind that doesn't leave visible scars until it's too late. Still, some of the congregation refused to believe it. They started GoFundMe campaigns for Delano's legal defense, shared videos of his past sermons as evidence that he couldn't be guilty. A man of God wouldn't do this, they said. But they didn't know what investigators knew. That power, protected in the name of God, can do anything it wants if no one looks close enough. Jury selection began 5 months after Micah's death. By then, the headlines had shifted. The story was no longer "Pastor loses assistant before wedding." It was "Prominent Georgia Reverend accused of murder and assault of male staffer." Courtroom sketches couldn't capture it, but if you were there, you felt it. The tension, the silence when Delano walked in, clean-shaven, navy suit, Bible in hand, no clergy collar, no robe, just a man, staring forward like it was Sunday. The prosecution didn't dramatize. They didn't need to. They played the tapes, the ones from Delano's laptop, the ones where Micah's voice cracked mid-sentence, the ones where the power wasn't spiritual. It was psychological. They showed text messages, voice memos, calendar invites labeled private cleansing, photos from the night of the murder, forensic images, Micah's internal injuries, blunt force trauma, and the security system logs. The camera had been turned off exactly 18 minutes before Micah arrived. The doorbell camera, unplugged from inside the panel. They tracked Delano's phone movement inside the house. He never left the bedroom hallway from 9:52 p.m. to 2:04 a.m. The defense argued consent. Then they argued mutual disagreement. Then, nothing. Because when Micah's medical records were presented, the jury saw something chilling. An ER visit 3 months before. Unexplained bruising. Silent discharge. Micah told the nurse, "I fell." No follow-up. No report filed. Just a line in the system. Patient declined further examination. The final witness was Micah's college roommate. He took the stand and said, "Micah told me this man wasn't mentoring him. He said, 'I'm being managed, not led.' He was scared to say more. And now he's not here to say anything at all." Delano didn't take the stand. His lawyers said he had nothing to hide. But the jury noticed his silence. They noticed when he didn't look at the evidence photos. When he flinched only once, and it wasn't during autopsy slides. It was during the audio, when Micah said, "You don't love me. You want to own me." The verdict took less than 3 hours. Guilty of second-degree murder, aggravated sexual assault, witness intimidation, tampering with evidence. Sentencing, 42 years, no parole, no possibility of ministerial reinstatement. The courtroom was silent, no shouting, no celebration, just Micah's mother, with a framed picture of her son clutched against her chest. The sentence was read. The gavel dropped, the cameras cut away. But real aftermaths don't start in courtrooms. They start in the quiet that follows, in the spaces where voices once filled the room, and now don't. Grace House of Power didn't close down. Not immediately, not officially. A statement was posted to their website 2 days after the verdict. "We are grieving. We are reflecting. We are healing." Donations didn't stop. Some congregants called the trial a test. Others left quietly. No final post, no goodbye sermon, just absence. Charisse Dupree, the almost bride, never gave an interview. But sources close to her said she moved to South Carolina, deleted her music pages, stopped performing, stopped speaking publicly. She wore white the day she was supposed to walk down the aisle, and buried her wedding dress the week after the funeral. Micah's family released a statement too. It didn't ask for peace. It didn't beg for unity. It just said, "Our son was not confused. He was not deceived. He was coerced, controlled, and finally silenced. But now, he will be heard." His grandmother placed his Bible on the pulpit at their hometown church, opened to Psalms 82:4. Rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. She didn't say a word that Sunday. She didn't have to. In the months that followed, several pastors came forward, quietly, anonymously, some admitting their own misuse of mentorship, some admitting they knew what Delano had been doing, and said nothing. The investigation prompted a wave of resignations across 3 states. Accountability became the trending topic. But accountability doesn't restore trust or bring back the dead. Micah was buried on a Sunday. The church was packed, not with members of Grace House, but with strangers. Strangers who had read his story. Strangers who had been silenced too. Strangers who whispered, "Thank you," as they walked past his casket, as if his life gave them permission to name what they'd been too afraid to speak. Justice came, but it didn't come when Micah needed it. It didn't come when he stayed silent, or when he whispered no in a hallway too sacred to scream. It came after a body hit the floor, after the robe dropped, after the mask cracked, and by then, it was too late to save him. This isn't just a story about one pastor or one victim. It's about power, and what happens when power finds no accountability. It's about silence, and the many shapes it takes. It's about how spiritual language can be weaponized to confuse consent with obedience and obedience with surrender. You won't find Micah Rollins on stage. You won't find him behind a pulpit or in viral clips preaching to thousands. But you'll find him in every young man who says yes when he wants to say no. In every church volunteer who stays late, hoping their faith won't be tested against their boundaries. In every voice memo sent at 2 a.m. that begins with a demand and ends in a threat. The robe doesn't always protect, and the title doesn't always tell the truth. If we only look at the platform and never the pattern, then stories like Micah's will keep happening. Quietly, elegantly, and fatally. So now the question isn't, how could this happen? The question is, who's next if we don't start listening Icona sooner? If you've ever felt silenced, manipulated, or controlled by someone hiding behind God, this story is your reminder. You are not alone, and it is not your fault. Speak up. Share this story. Don't let Micah's name be forgotten. Not in the algorithms, not in the pews, not in the silence. This was the story of Micah Rollins, a servant, a fighter, a son, and a man whose no cost him everything. If this story moved you, comment below. Tell your truth, speak their names, and subscribe for stories that don't just tell the facts, but expose the truth.